Hello, hello everyone. It's Erica from The Business Alchemist, and I have Daniela Liscio here from Eat for Sport. Daniela is a certified health coach who works with individuals who are desiring to do something athletic, like climb a mountain, run a marathon, and she helps them get nutritionally ready, as well as ready fitness-wise for them to complete their event. So, wanted to thank Daniela for coming. It's your birthday, so wanted to say happy birthday and thank you for talking to us on your birthday.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, have you always been interested in health?
I have been. I have always had a real interest in more than, I guess, the elements of health, including nutrition, fitness, just finding things that keep your body healthy. I've always been interested in that, and I knew when I was going to be leaving law that if I was going to leave, I wanted to be in something that I was really passionate about.
So you mentioned that when you decided to leave law. So, for everyone, I work with people that are transitioning from working a day job to having their own business, and you obviously had a career in law. So kind of tell me about how you decided, or actually let's go back to the beginning and tell me what your first career was and like what that was like and what that was all about.
Sure. After I did 2 degrees in economics, which I really enjoyed. I loved the academic study of economics, and I worked at a bank for a couple of years, and I think I could never shake the desire to go to law school. It was always sort of there from a child. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I think this is how a lot of people have these images of lawyers in their mind, and that's where the seed is planted. So watching Perry Mason with my dad made me think, wow, the law is really interesting, and I just couldn't shake it. So here I was working at a bank and thought, I think if I don't go to law school, it's never going to leave me that desire to maybe try it, give it a try. So I went to law school. I knew that I wanted to do corporate law because that was my background, and I loved it, and I was a corporate lawyer. So really, I consider my first career as a corporate lawyer, and I really did enjoy it. And I thought, if I'm going to transition out of it, and we can talk about those too. There's lots of reasons why it was time to leave. But I thought I really want it to be something that I'm going to really enjoy. And what am I really passionate about? Well, that's where the sort of interest in health came from. When I looked at myself and asked myself, what am I really interested in? That was an easy answer for me: food, nutrition, health, and fitness. And I wanted to try and do something that was going to incorporate those passionate interests of mine.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you said at first you envisioned yourself as a lawyer. So you were really going into something that you thought, it was a passion of yours and a desire of yours, even though I'm sure your life wasn't like Perry Mason. So kind of tell me how you decided, when you decided, okay, I've checked off my goal of becoming a lawyer, doing corporate law, and I want to jump into something different.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think it was probably a process over several years, really. You were a lawyer yourself, so you know some of the challenges involved with that. I think it was partly just the demands on time that just become difficult over the course of several years. I was surrounded by a lot of very unhealthy people, and it's concerning from the perspective of, I really think it's so important that people do what they're good at and what they love. And frankly, I think what you're going to be particularly good at are things that you really love, because that's really where you can sort of pour your heart and soul into something, which I think is a good way to work and to live, to get the most out of ourselves. And so it's great that you have all of these lawyers who really enjoy what they're doing. I mean, there's wonderful aspects about it. It's intellectually stimulating. You work with very smart and dedicated people, and you meet some really wonderful clients, actually. And so there's a lot of great things about it. It's a profession in which you can continue to grow and develop. But then in that, because of those demands on time, you have this circle of people who, maybe forget about themselves sometimes. And like I said, just a lot of really unhealthy people. And I thought, I don't want that to be me in the next, 10 or longer years, frankly, the next year. And so over the course of some time, because I also had to think about, if I'm going to be leaving something that I do really enjoy, it needs to be something that then I'm really passionate about. And it was figuring out exactly how I was going to make that transition. And I know you talk about this. You've got great advice in terms of making sure that you're ready to do that. And one of the ways you need to be ready is being financially ready to do it. And that's a challenge. I think everybody's got their own challenges. They've got their own financial requirements, whether they've got a family or not. And I mean, it's a very serious consideration. So it was probably a process of several years to get me to the point where I could say, okay, I'm now ready to do this. And then it happened that in my personal life, I met someone, and that would have required me to move, and I had to make that decision. And so I guess it sort of all just came together at the right time. But to answer your question, that was a longer answer, but the quick answer was, yeah, it was probably a process of, I would say, a good 3 years where I was really seriously thinking, okay, what is that next step?
And I think that's so common for a lot of people that decide to make the change. It's like you kind of think about it and, you're not really sure, or you might have a bad day or just a bad week or month, and you're like, I'm going to make this happen. And then things get a little bit better and you're like, okay, maybe I can hold out. So what was that moment, if you can, remember it or tell us, where you said, okay, I'm actually going to commit to doing this? Or it was no longer a maybe or it would be nice to I'm actually going to do this.
Well, one thing that I did do was hire a career coach, and I think there's this thing where suddenly everyone is a coach, and and you can relate to that, right? You've entered this world of coaching. I think there's a real reason for that. It's because coaching works. You have an advocate for you in your life, and frankly, someone who is going to keep you accountable. And as much as I could say, okay, here's my plan, and sure, I got some of those things done off the list, but frankly, many of us live, especially when you're working a lot, and you get caught up in this day-to-day routine of going to work. We get caught up in this state of overwhelm, which I loved when my coach had sort of introduced me to that. And you have to stop telling yourself that. Frankly, if you keep telling yourself, I'm just overwhelmed, I don't know where to start, you're going to keep yourself in that routine. And so me hiring a career coach was one critical step that I needed. And we worked on a timeline. So I had gone from thinking about different things and working on some of them quite significantly, but for 3 years, but to taking it to the point where you exactly highlight, which is, okay, now I'm really ready to do this, was me working with her to actually set a timeline. And we picked a date, and it was as simple as her saying in one of our sessions, and we worked together for probably maybe a little bit less than a 6-month period, 5 to 6 months, and it's amazing what you can get done in a short amount of time. And she, during one session, simply said, all right, if you had to pick a day, what would that day be when you were going to exit? And I thought, I don't know, but I picked whatever came to my mind, and that date was instrumental. And I think that's another thing. You just have to, at some point, your instinct will give you an answer. I mean, yes, you have to be smart about it, but part of being smart about it is just tuning into that instinct. And is it the time? Did that just come out of the air, or is there a basis for that? And there was a basis of it for it in my case, and I just went with that date where I was going to make that decision and form the firm that I was leaving. And sometimes it's all we need is just a critical point, an end point where you have to work towards that. And it's not easy. And like you talk about and teach people and help them get there, which is but you have to be thoughtful about it. You have to plan for it, and there are a number of concrete steps that you can take in order to do that.
Yeah, it's funny because I just came across this resource. It's called Owner versus Victim. And it talks about how, you have a lot of people that are in a circumstance and a victim will come up with reasons why, because of that circumstance, they can't do what they really want to do or take that leap. Whereas when you're an owner, you own your situation and say, okay, despite having the situation, or how can I even use this to propel me? And what I love about it is that it only takes a moment. It's really a mind shift where the minute you decide to own your circumstance, things can change in a number of ways. And so it's interesting that once you pick the date, or picking a date was critical to you saying, okay, I'm actually going to plan for this. Because once you have a date on there, it's like, okay, I have a finite amount of time to plan things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me, what were your plans? Did you have things that you wanted to absolutely accomplish before you decided to inform the firm that you were leaving?
Well, I did want to. One of the first thing was making sure that my finances were in order to do that. There's a certain reality to life. I didn't want to depend or rely on anybody, and even though in some respects I do, but the goal was going from self-sufficiency to continue on the self-sufficiency and replacing the income that I was not going to have with another income source. And sometimes you can't do that right away. You do that over a period of time. And I think that's actually a critical thing to think about, because many of us get caught up in, well, I'm a lawyer and I have a very stable income and a very good income. So why in God's name would I want to let go of that? There's a certain comfort that comes from that. It lets you do the things that you really do want to do. When I love to travel, I know that's a huge interest of yours as well. And for me, it was a lot about there are adventures to find, and I really want to explore the world. I've learned so much from my travels and met just fantastic people. And you've got this network around the world, and I think, wow, that's really what has given my life such interest and such just it's made it amazing. And but you need an income to do some of these things that you like to do, whatever they happen to be. They're different for everybody. But so I thought, okay, well, how do I maintain that? I don't want to just not have these things, but there are certain sacrifices that you make along the way. You really need to decide, okay, what is important in your life and what's not important, and making that list, making an actual list of where you can cut costs and where you are going to need income to support the lifestyle that you want to have. But like I said, you can get easily caught up in, okay, but I'm not going to be able to replace that income right away. So I can't leave this job. I'm trapped in it. But we don't think, well, yeah, but what are the opportunities when what risks are there in staying put and in staying exactly where you are? Frankly, I made it a commitment of mine to, if I was going to leave, I was actually going to be doing better financially over time. I'm not there yet, but you've got to have a plan on, I was going to be doing better than I would have been at the law firm. And that's not necessarily important to some people. Money is not necessarily the issue. The issue is, what do you want out of your life? And I know it's not about money. It's about like I said, for example, the travel and the certain things that are really important to me, taking care of my family. And those are things that I wanted to, I feel I have those commitments, and I guess what I'm saying is you need to see opportunities other than in the small world that you've created when you have a 9-to-5 job, which is hard to see sometimes, but you've got to look for them, and you've got to appreciate there are opportunities out there, and many which can be much better and more lucrative, but it does absolutely take a ton of work and planning.
And that's, I think a lot of people, like when they want to they say, I want to have more time, I want to have more freedom. But, as as an entrepreneur, it does require more of you. And you're now depending on yourself, really, to make money and to pay the rent and those kind of things.
Right.
So how, and like you said, it's because of this world you're creating. So you're almost dismantling what you know, which is a legal career. I mean, you're creating something else, which might not have an immediate return. So what is it that kind of keeps you going and keeps you believing in this world that you're creating and that it's going to help you meet your financial commitments and support your family and travel?
Well, I think one of the things that my coach had also helped me work through is how do you align your values with what you are doing in your work life, for example. And I know you've talked about this, and I've read things from you that hit upon the same thing, and I think that's really important. So you do want to create a life that is very much aligned with your values. So in doing that, you need to first of all identify what those values are. If it means having time with your family, then which is perfectly legitimate, then you need to identify that and say, okay, well, how do I do that? So it's sometimes as simple as, again, you have to make a concrete list and have these things in your mind. Well, what are my values? Give it some really good thought, and that's always a good starting point. And then in terms of moving towards those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to move immediately to them. You may, and I've talked to you a little bit about this, my health coaching business right now is sort of the first iteration of the business that I want to create. So that's very much one of the things that sort of keeps me going, which is, okay, this is my first stage, but the next stages involve, right now I work one-on-one with clients, or I will teach a class, for example, and those are amazingly rewarding things, even more rewarding than I actually expected them to be. But at some point, I want to reach out to a greater audience, and that may involve things like being more involved in the regulation of our food industry, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I have different goals with respect to that. So it's moving from one, as I say, iteration of a business to another, and so I think you have to have a clear idea of, well, what do I want my business to be? Do I want to be a small business owner, or do I want to be an entrepreneur where I am moving into other businesses? And I had to give that actually quite a bit of thought before I was as part of my planning process as well, because I think and that may change. It's not to say that it's set in stone, but I think just as it is in life in general, having a plan is always a good thing, and or at least is always helpful. It's not to say that it's a rigid plan. Things evolve and they change, and you may change your mind. Frankly, I mean, I've enjoyed health coaching so much where this may be an iteration that is taking longer than I initially thought it would, and that's okay, because again, you're getting something out of it that is aligned with the values that you've identified for yourself. So, coming back to it, I think it's just it's having that plan, but working towards something that you have identified as your distinct values.
Right. And you made a distinction between small business owner and entrepreneur. So in your mind, what's the difference between the two, and why have you chosen entrepreneur over just having a small business?
I think the difference, the key difference, is probably as a small business owner is someone who you have created a business, and it's not to say that it's necessarily going to stay a small business that may grow. But you have decided that this is what you're going to do. That's your one element. So you go from sort of a 9-to-5 job to a 9-to-5 job that you have created. And 9 to 5, obviously, I use very loosely. I don't know that anything is ever 9 to 5 anymore, and certainly it isn't as a business owner, as you know. But it's I guess you've created you've created your own job through your business, and hopefully it's one that you really are quite passionate about and interested in. An entrepreneur, I think, will look at I think a longer, not necessarily a longer term view, a different view where you have created a business that you may want to change into something else or create another business. You've created something that can grow with you or without you. But again, still coming, I think a lot of these things their source is an interest at the very least. I don't know that anybody starts a business in something that they're completely uninterested in. Sure. So they've created something that can, like I said, grow on their own or with them still involved. But then they're going to move on to something else where something else is going to grow. And maybe that's a completely different business. Maybe it's a related business. But it's a process, I think, of that change. And so I think that's the difference, at least the way I see it. Mm-hmm. And I think the only reason it's important to bring up is, again, you've just got to identify, well, what is it that you are planning? What are you looking for? What are you looking for out of your business?
Right. And I think, being an entrepreneur myself, and I've tried a lot of different things, and some things work and other things don't. It's really fun. You get to be creative. I feel as if the world really is my oyster. I think it involves maybe a higher level of risk because sometimes things don't work and I have to be careful not to spread myself too thin. But this whole idea of kind of like imagining your world as you're going on is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It really is. It really is just, you kind of hit it on the nose when you said the world is your oyster. And I don't know that you don't feel that if you feel trapped in an office or that job that you is kind of not, part of your soul, I guess. And yes, it sounds dramatic, but and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having a job that you enjoy, but you don't necessarily love. A job is often a means to an end, and that's totally valid, especially when you have, you have family considerations and other support obligations and so on. But again, I think, again, to grow as a person, I think everybody owes it to themselves to think about other things that they may want to do and at least give it some thought and attention. And even if that means keeping your job, that just may mean, maybe you have a little side business or you don't have a business at all. Maybe you apply yourself through things like volunteer work or whatever is important to you, hobbies, anything. So long as you give yourself those opportunities. And the issue really is, well, does my job keep me from those things that truly make me grow as a person? And that's where I think that's where I think everybody owes it to themselves to think those things through.
It's such a beautiful statement because I think, I never want to come across as someone who thinks everyone should just quit their job and start their business. It's more that everyone should have the opportunity to find out who they really are, what they really value, and what they really want. And then, if it means quitting your job and doing something else, fine, or even getting another job. Or it could mean, as you said, staying where you are and just finding other ways to make sure that you're feeding your soul.
Right.
So what's interesting to me is that you were a partner at a law firm, right? So you're a partner in a prestigious New York law firm. And, for a lot of people, that looks as if you've reached the pinnacle of success. And there's a lot of prestige that comes with that kind of title. So was there any trepidation of kind of shedding that and then starting over as a health coach, as a certified health coach, but just, did you have any fear about leaving the kind of professional career aside to do something different?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially because, as I said, I actually enjoyed my job. I liked it. I liked being a lawyer. I think I was fortunate in the sense that I made sure that I was not going to get caught up in titles, for example. And yes, sure, it was great that I was a partner at a firm, but so what? At the end of the day, my response is, so what? And I think that's a really good clue, first of all, as to, well, is this really then the thing that I should be doing for the next 20 years of my life? And I guess, yes, there was some trepidation, but again, for me, I saw the opportunity. There's an opportunity cost of getting caught up in that role, I suppose. And it was important to me to explore other things. And absolutely, and lawyers, a group of lawyers at a firm would be the first to. I mean, there's this thing. It's like, well, how could you give this? How could you give this up? And but I think for the most part, people understand, look, there's other things to do in life. There are other things that you are going to be good at, and there are other lucrative opportunities to take advantage of. And there are opportunities to take advantage of to learn and to grow. So I think, like I said, yes, there was some trepidation, but at the end of the day, it was not difficult to overcome, because a lawyer at a firm was never where I saw myself being long term anyway. I knew that coming out of school, that yes, I was going to be a lawyer for a certain amount of time, but it was not going to be a career that I took with me to the end. And that's not to say that I wasn't expecting to enjoy it. In some ways, I probably enjoyed it more than I expected to, which is a wonderful thing. But I think for me, it just was about taking advantage of other opportunities, and primarily those opportunities coming out of the things that I do really care about. I think nutrition, diet, our overall health is a critically important issue, and I don't think people actually appreciate how important it is. Yes, there's a whole lot of talk, and every time you open a newspaper, there is some new health and wellness section, and that's great. That's all very important, but I think we need a lot more substance behind all of that. It's not just about, okay, getting out and going for a walk or getting in your exercise. A lot of us think we know what we're supposed to be doing, but we don't actually know exactly, and our health is suffering as a result. And and this is where my interest in food policy and regulation comes in. I think what we've done in that regard is horrendous. We have a complete mismatch between really what is keeping us healthy and the food policies and regulation that are in place. And frankly, I find that it's very dismaying. It's terrible. To me, it's not criminal, but it's to use the phrase loosely, it is criminal. I mean, this is our health that we're talking about, and I don't think we have given it the attention that it needs. We have an epidemic on our hands, and we don't treat it as if we do, and that's a problem. So again, I think me focusing on the things that I do really care about was just a very important aspect of why I'm doing this at all. If I didn't care about it, I could have just stayed at the law firm and gotten off on my title as a partner at a law firm, but that just is never, that was never enough for me. I knew that about myself. So it was probably in some ways easier for me, because I knew I wasn't going to, I guess, let that make me more trapped.
Yeah, and I hear your passion about health and food policy, and I've even worked with you. I'm preparing to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and in our coaching, I could tell how passionate you were about it, and how you really were about making sure that I owned my own health. But I never made being too busy or being in an unideal location to be the excuse for not getting healthy. So why don't you share with us a little bit about Eat for Sport, expound a bit upon your bigger mission, and kind of where you see it going in the future.
Sure. So Eat for Sport is, at the moment, is a health coaching business. So I work one-on-one mostly with clients, and we look at their overall health. We say, what are the things in your life that are holding you back from the things that you have wanted to accomplish in the past? And whether that may be as small as losing 10 pounds, it may be as great as, or losing 50 or 60 pounds. But it's more than that. It's certainly way more than just about weight, as you know. It's about how do we change this person to really become their optimal self. And I think the health coaching is important in the sense that it can help people identify ways that fit into their specific life in the context of their jobs, in context of their families, in context of their venue, their location. How do we help you have a healthier diet? How do I help you create an exercise regime that works for you? But beyond the exercise and diet, we need to kind of dig a little deeper and say, well, what else is there in your life that is keeping you from your optimal healthy person? And that may be your sleep, how you are dealing with stress, how you're dealing with all of the balance between family and work. I mean, that's a huge issue. It's very easy to say if all you have, you're a professional athlete and all you have time to, or you're supposed to make time for those 6 hours of exercise, not that I think keeps you healthy by any stretch of the imagination, but your life is created in that basket of, okay, we need this optimal performance. I tend to work with amateur athletes, people like you and I who they want to try something. In your case, for example, you're going to try climbing your first mountain. That's no small feat. It's a huge endeavor. For someone else, I'm working with someone, a doctor now actually, who's training for his 25th marathon. But there are certain things that you can still do to adjust, and there's somebody else wants to run their first 5K race. We are all athletes in that sense, and at the end of the day, we're all trying to do things that really motivate us and hopefully do keep us healthier. So I guess I work with people to try and get them to their optimal performance, essentially, and that's really what I want to do. But more than just, for example, preparing, in your case, if I can use you as an example, it was, as we talked about in our first session, it's more than just preparing you to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. What habits can you develop that you will carry on for the rest of your life that you can reach to? You've got this arsenal, you've got this body of education and this body of habits that you have been developing to help keep you in a healthy state, basically. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is really just about that, is about that health coaching, and we touched on it at the beginning of the call a little bit. The coaching is just sometimes critically important to kickstart a completely transformational experience. And I think that's what you aim to do as a coach. It's not a matter of, I want to keep working with you for the next 3 years of your life. It's a matter of, let's see what we can do in these next few months where you truly are going to enter this completely transformational phase and move into learning and relying on yourself, me giving you those tools to know what you can do going forward, and that really actually are going to help you. I read articles sometimes and I think this is not the basis of science. I mean, reporters now just tend to go on these sound bites and talk about what's in vogue at any given time or these types of diets, and it's very easy to get caught up in that. It's also very easy to get very confused over the just sheer amount of education out there. So my job is to distill it and to really give you, I guess, some factual information, some real information, and everybody is different. So let's figure out what does actually work best for you. So that's the health coaching aspect, and like I said, it's actually been even more rewarding than I thought. It's a wonderful thing to just help people tap into that. We always talk about, well, it's the inside of us that is the most important, and it is. It's who we are as people. The problem is, I don't think we can truly be optimal if our health is suffering. It's very hard to do that. So I think you have to look at that outer shell. And besides which, when we talk about health, we obviously talk about the whole body. But are you looking and feeling the best that you can if the answer is no, well, then can you say, okay, I really am doing, or I am the best person that I can be. And it doesn't change you as a person, but it just lets you be that optimal person, which again is a lifelong process. But I think it's one that we owe it to ourselves to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And then in terms of moving the business forward, like I said, I do think we have some really significant issues from a macro level. If we want to just look nationally, what are we doing with our food policy and regulation that is out of sync with the realities of health, and how can we bring those more in alignment? So at some point, I would like to address those things in more concrete ways other than just through education, but actually being involved in organizations that truly that end up creating those policies, because I do think that is a critical issue, and it will become, if we don't address it, I think we have an epidemic that will completely get out of control, and I think that's just a really sad thing, because again, at the end of the day, this is our health that we're talking about. As part of what I do is I give classes, and I sit in these classes, and I see often, sometimes the elderly who have never had a chance to know what some of these things that we do know now are, or how they could have helped them, how simple things, as simple as choosing a slightly different diet could have kept them from chronic disease. And when you look at it that way, it's really quite heartbreaking, because you think these are things that are completely within our control. So how can we not address them? So the educational aspect is important, but how do I do that on a grander scale? And the way I do that on a grander scale is to put myself in a situation where I can actually influence food policy and regulation, so that we are reaching broader amounts of people. Yeah. And then the third thing, I know this is a very long answer, third thing very quickly is I am trying to develop a food product as well, and that's another aspect of the business, totally outside of anything that I know. It's not at all my experience to come up with packaging and all of the various things that go into creating a product, but it's so interesting. It's very fun. It's not easy at all, but it's certainly it's interesting. It's a great experience.
And that goes back to being an entrepreneur, how fun it is, because here you're taking something that you have no clue what you're getting into.
Right.
But you get to be creative and have fun. And it's nice to be able to do that. It's like, you don't have to be a kid to just play. And
That's right.
You can come up with the next amazing, granola bar or nutritional bar,
Right. Absolutely.
And I think, I read your blog, and I see that you caused quite a controversy with a blog posted on Gatorade, and
right.
And it's I just want to say, it's interesting to me how a lot of labeling, things will say they're healthy or optimal or ideal, and then you read the ingredients, and you can't even name or pronounce the first 10 on there. So there's definitely a lot, I think I agree, that could be done around just food policy and how consumers can empower themselves to know, okay, can make the really smart choices.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to thank you. So if there were anyone that is, just definitely committed to taking the leap, and they're saying, okay, I've been thinking about it for years, and I'm just ready to really get started, what would your advice be? Like, what's the first thing they should do to actually get into action of leaving their job and starting their own business?
I think one of the things is what both you and I did, was picking a date, find a date. Think about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I use the example, in my case, it was what date came to mind. Well, that first date that came to mind was after months of really concentrated effort. And yes, that date kind of formulated from all of that background work. But pick a day. Pick a date that is realistic, that is one that you can work towards, but have it and be committed to it, and then create a plan as to how you are going to get there. So include a financial plan, include a plan in terms of, for example, do I need more education? In my case, we didn't talk about that, but I didn't necessarily need a whole lot of education, but actually I felt it was necessary to give myself that credibility, and more because I wanted to formalize a lot of the education that I had already given myself after years and years of informal education and experimentation. So have a plan for things that you are going to need to let yourself do the things that you want to do. So whether that's education or experience of some kind, for example, and a lot of that sometimes you can get through volunteer work, for example, or just offering to work for someone or a company, and just kind of doing that. And there's a ton of wiggle room in your day-to-day life that you can just tweak. Yes, we are so short of time, but find the time in your day to have a plan on how you're going to do those things. So, like I said, the financial plan is important, the plan on education and experience, and then, of course, just if you're planning, for example, to start a business, what do I need to do to actually have that happen, and make that list, have a date, and take little steps every day. You do not have to, many of us, again, we get caught up in this, oh my gosh, there is so much to do, and there is a whole lot to do. But frankly, the moment you start your business, there's going to be an even greater list of things to do. And so how do I just stay committed to that and just work slowly? You do not have to do everything in one day. It does not happen that way. So it's like, I've got clients who say, I want to run a marathon right away. You're not going to do that. I'm sorry to tell you, it's just not going to happen. And we know that from our lives, and yet we keep in our minds, this is the way it has to happen. It doesn't. But don't sell yourself short by saying, okay, well, if I can't do it all right away, I'm just not going to do it. That's crazy. Take little baby steps.
I'm so glad you said that, because the people that I work with, a lot of them, they are professionals. So they'll start off their session with, I'm really sorry, I haven't done all that I meant to do, work got in the way. And I think it is just driving from the point that this is going to take time, it's supposed to take time, but that's where having a plan helps you use the little time that you do have really wisely. But like you said, it's just chipping away at it slowly, and then you look back a year, later, and you've made incredible progress. So thank you so much for reiterating that point. I think it's really
important. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I wanted to thank you again, Daniela. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
I will include a link to your website below this video, so if anybody wants to access it and see what you're up to, they can do so. And
sure.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Erica. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.